All right. This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by PrizePicks, coming at you live on YouTube Wednesday evening. It's January 17th, and we're going to get into this 124-117 Wolves win in Detroit on Wednesday night. A bunch of different kind of topics to get into with this one. I thought it was a really good Jaden game. Rudy played really well. It was kind of the first test in a while against a bad team. Which is always a little interesting for this Wolves group. We're going to get into some of those topics, talk about the game, Kyle and I, and then those of you who are in the YouTube chat. We're going to try and answer a bunch of questions, kind of maybe about 30 minutes from now or so. So stick around for that. Pop back in later if you want to have your questions answered. We got Kyle Theige here with me. What's up, Kyle?
I was just tweeting out the link. One bit of housekeeping from you've been all over pods this week, right? Like you did one with Britt and you did one with Chris and you're going with Jace on Friday. But you were a special guest on our friend's Crunch Wears No Pants.
I was, yeah.
And I just want to clarify for the listeners out there because I got a lot of responses. I am also over 6 foot. You were like, I'm the only one covering the team, Dane, that's over 6 feet.
Well, you got to get out to Minnesota to.
If you believe in rounding up, which I always do, I'm closer to 6'2" than I am to 6 foot. So again, just wanted to clear that up. But yeah, you also said too at the top when you introed this that this was their first kind of real experience or game against a bad team. That Blazers game was the worst.
I blacked that out of my memory. You're right.
You called me that night. You're like, that's the worst team, I think. And they had some injuries and stuff and rebuilding, but that was the worst team I've ever watched in 7 years of covering basketball. Was that Blazers roster. The Pistons tonight, 124-117, Wolves win to move to 29-11, but that Pistons team has players. Now, will they sell at the deadline, Burks and Bogdanovich and stuff, but they have like real NBA guys, like Ivy could be special. Whatever the Blazers threw out there at Target Center was, the Iowa Wolves would have competed against them for sure. So
I agree. Yeah, no, I mean, the Pistons are like young and feisty and like they
terribly
do kind
coached.
of have maybe they do have like it is their group, right? Kind of the future. Whereas like that's what made the Portland game so boring is it was just listless because Portland was. They're just I hadn't seen a game like that where there was just so much disinterest from the players out there, and it was a back-to-back for Portland and all that, but that team is in a bad place. Not to say that the now 4-37 Detroit Pistons are in a better one. They're literally on pace for 8 wins this season. But yeah, they gave the Wolves a little bit more maybe than we would have expected if we were expecting kind of a Portland type of game. They needed some things. They needed a few players to actually treat it like a real game and to play all the way through. And the two, I guess 3 players I would say that stood out to me that did that in this game. And this isn't to take away from Kat and Ant, who had really strong offensive games, but there was kind of that from Rudy and Nikhil and Jaden. There was kind of that like not messing around element of it. Particularly, I thought with Rudy right off from the beginning of the game, right? He was kind of dominant on the interior, finding ways to be able to score there. And I think that's kind of indicative of not just who Rudy has been this season, but like for his whole career, as all the different things, people can poke holes in Rudy's game. I mean, he's got to be up there, right, as one of the most serious basketball players in the NBA, like professional. I'm coming here, I'm doing work, we're getting wins. And that's what he's done, for his whole career. And with on a team that has a 22-year-old who just from being 22, maybe his focus can wander a little bit game to game or opponent to opponent. That element of Rudy, I've just really grown in my appreciation of just a pro, and that provides a floor for this team. Me and Britt or me and Chris were talking about it the other day where I just don't have that same worry or concern about the bottom really falling out for this team. And so much of that, I think, has to do with Rudy and his ability, just that you can expect he's going to kind of deliver in a game even like this against a team. He knows that you got to win these games. You want to be the 1 seed, and he plays like that. I think a lot of credit to him there.
I think Mike Conley and Kyle Anderson are two of the most mature, just great veterans in the league. And I still think Rudy Gobert is the most mature player on the team. Like, if you were just doing a maturity standpoint, and that's nothing against Kyle or Mike, but Rudy just, I think it's partly the reason he gets clowned a lot just on social. He's just a very serious guy, right? His Instagram is full of cat photos. He just takes his job really seriously. And when he's out there, I mean, again, too, this was another one of those games. The Pistons have some younger bigs, but it was kind of like that Blazers game where it's just, they have no one. I mean, it was Mike Muscala for most of it, right? Like, there's just no one to really slow him down. But he just, he has that blue collar, what is it, lunch pail mentality where he just shows up and he kind of sets the tone. I know that is a cliche thing to say, but you go to all these games too, right? I think he literally sets the tone. Like, when he's out there,
right.
I mean, he was he wasn't a team best because Mike wasn't at a plus 20, but he was plus 12, and he just, when he's out there, Finch just feels more secure. And anytime he like subs Rudy out, but then team goes on a little run, he just throws Rudy back into the fire. So I thought it was a really great game by him. And just, again, he shows how mature he is. He shows that he really wants to win. Gone are the days. There was like, I guess, one random moment in this game where he kind of wanted the ball. He had Killian Hayes on him or whatever.
Yeah, I remember that.
He just wants to win these games. He's not 26 anymore. He's not really worried about stats. He got his tonight, 19 and 16. But yeah, just a really good performance by him. And you're continuing to see whether it's Utah Rudy or an advanced version of Utah Rudy. He just is. I mean, we're not getting into this, but I think he's the team's MVP on the whole season. Like, as good as Ant has been and Karl and those guys will probably lead the chances of making All-Star games. What Rudy does night in and night out is just incredible. And he did it against
I like that. I've been thinking a lot about the, and almost not even wanting to really have the conversation of like, if we had to pick 2 All-Stars from this Wolves team, which 2 of the 3 would you pick? Because you can't, like, you could make arguments for kind of any pairing of the 2. Maybe Ant is the most, I don't know, the one we expect to get it the most, but it's kind of, that's the distinction, right? There's like there's an all-star. So maybe the stars are Cat and Ant, but the most valuable of the 3, it's not hard to make an argument that it's Gobert, particularly when we know what the foundation of this team is. The identity of this team is its defense, which is as dominant as it is, not just because of Rudy Gobert, but certainly would not be the same without him. He's up there, man. He's up there for sure. I think it's underrated. Just like kind of listening around, you hear more of the all-star talk, and a bunch of people get snubbed and stuff, but that Rudy's kind of like already put in the snub bin, like not even really being considered for it. I don't think that fairly captures what his value to the team has been, even if that doesn't make him necessarily an all-star.
There was a good little video today from the podcast that Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce do, and Kevin Garnett was like all in, like Rudy Gobert has to be in the mix for an all-star spot. And again, it's kind of that blind resume I always joke about with March Madness, that if you just took Gobert's name off the stats and you said that guy is leading the number 1 defense in the league for the number 1 team in the West, right, which as they wake up tomorrow morning, we're doing this late on January 17th, but they wake up tomorrow, January 18th, they will have been in first place for 2 months. And what was it? They had been in first place for like 30 total days in 34 years. Now they've been in first place in the West for 60-some days. So yeah, I'm with you. I think this team deserves to have 3 All-Stars. I'm sure we'll get into All-Star stuff later this month. But Coop's doing a great job. Cooper Carlson, who does all our behind-the-scenes stuff on YouTube. I've seen a lot of comments. I want to just throw this out there quick, that the team sleptwalked tonight. It wasn't a good performance. I agree with all that. Like,
yeah, right. For sure.
If you just tune into this and you just saw a box scoring like 124, 117, what the hell? I don't think it was that close. It was never really in doubt. When they really needed to, they got an 8-0 run towards the end of the fourth quarter to kind of ice it. But if you thought they sleptwalked, they did. If you thought they played with their food, they did. I don't know how you break that because, again, when I watch other teams, like I watched the Warriors kind of play with their food against the Grizzlies the other night on, I think it was TNT or NBA TV, and then they lost the game. I think Johnny K had it, like, it's just kind of human nature sometimes. It's not ideal. You would love for them to just blow every team out, but I don't think 124-117 was as close as the final score said. I thought that game was pretty much in hand for most of it, even though I did get a little nervous at the end of the third.
Yeah, well, then that's when they made the run, kind of like late third, early fourth. You're like, okay, I put my notes. Finally, some separation, you know, in the score there. But yeah, if we want to nitpick it, like they could use that little 8-minute stretch literally at any time earlier in the game, and if you would have got up to by 14 points early in the third quarter or in the second quarter, it would have. I think it's fair to say it probably would have broke Detroit there.
The best comment on YouTube right now is from Wombo Combo, and it was just this is what I was thinking going into this, kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. It was like, this was the two mentalities, like, cool, you beat the Pistons, or holy shit, it's time for a players only meeting. That's pretty much the only two outcomes of this. And we are on 382 days removed from the last players only meeting this team had after they lost to the Pistons. So I think they lost to the Pistons twice last year in their 2 games. This year, we've talked about this all season, leading up to the season. Their Achilles heel has been playing down to the competition and losing those games. You would have loved to have seen them play a little better tonight, but they win. And I think I saw Jim Pete say they're now 12-2 against teams under 500. So can't really ask for too much more than that. Tonight, we can get into it. It stood out to me that the offense was just junk, like just so much ISO and getting into the late in the shot clock. Again, that's part of just not taking your opponent probably very seriously, but another win, right? I tweeted out they were 29-11. They're 29-53 back in 15-16. That's the year that Kevin Garnett came back. So Jesus. We still have come a long way, but they have things to work on, and this is kind of part of the continuous every other day that Dane does a pod. It's like the offense, man, got to get more movement, got to get more cutting, got to get more structure in there, because when it's just heavy ISO, it's just so gross to watch.
Yeah, well, it kind of opens up room for volatility, right? Mm-hmm. Then you're just like, is this a game where we're making shots or not making shots, right? And when they are moving the ball, that it leads to the shots that they're generating are higher percentage looks, more of the 100% looks, the Rudy dunks, the hitting somebody on a cut, or and they got some of these, the catch and shoot looks for Karl, where you go, we'll take that every single time. They generated some of that, not enough. And that, and that's the thing. If you're like, this game should have been over in the first half. Yeah. It's because they didn't do enough of that. They settled and we're just okay. But just being okay is all that you needed to, all you needed to have in this game against a 4-37 team.
So Karl finishes with 27 points on 10 of 17, 5 for 5 from 3. Kind of want to touch on that before we close down shop, but let's get into, you said you had 3 guys that you really thought stood out. Rudy
let me grab the first break first. We'll get into that. I want Jaden and Karl coming up for sure as the 2 people I'd like to hit on. The first thing I want to say is we have 2 tickets to give away for the game tomorrow night against the Memphis Grizzlies. We've been giving away these tickets to Patreon subscribers all year. They're lower level seats, kind of mid-court, middle of the lower level there. They're really nice seats. If you are available to go tomorrow night, it is a 9 p.m. game. Just send us a message on Patreon that you are available, and we'll pick somebody randomly from there. And if you want to become a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/DaneMooreNBA. Kyle, let's also, as we do, let's talk about some English muffins here.
Oh my God.
This is becoming a weekly Kyle Theige.
This is my favorite segment of all of podcasting. I just finished off the stuff and muffin ones that are like Thanksgiving-ish themed. Oh, so good.
stoneandskillet.com. It is English muffins. They're delicious English muffins. They're not your just empty nothingness English muffins. It's a brand with a cool story too, and I was excited to be able to have this be a sponsor for the show, because one, I already had these English muffins at my house. You can purchase them at Whole Foods, and so I had already purchased these, and so when they reached out, I'm like, this is wild. I'm a big English muffin fan. I'm already a fan of your product. So it was cool. And I think I love their story about these three brothers kind of starting this in Boston, and it's kind of taken off on the East Coast, and they're kind of moving to the Midwest here. So we want to help kind of spark some business for them. You can do that at stoneandskillet.com. If you do go to stoneandskillet.com and purchase them with our promo code Dane, that gets you 20% off. If you don't want to do that, just go try them at Whole Foods as well. Again, that's Stone and Skillet, stoneandskillet.com, promo code Dane.
If you want to know if those are good, I'll tell you how I know they're good. Because you know this. I didn't have power all weekend because we're going through an ice storm. And also just a quick shout out. They're not a sponsor, but just shout out to the Midwest in general. Because I love living on the West Coast now. And all the people out here are pretty nice. But they don't have a damn clue how to handle the forecast of snow, let alone actual snow. Long story short, trees down, wind. I'm without power. I'm losing my mind. I can't watch football. So I ate 2 Stone and Skillet English muffins without even toasting them. Just raw dogged it, and it was fantastic. And that's when I was like, okay, I will eat these for the rest of my life. So Stone and Skillet.
Stoneandskillet.com. All right, Kyle, let's do Jaden next. I mean, I don't want to brush over. Yeah. I don't want to brush over Karl, who's, I think, made 17 of his last 24 threes. We'll talk about him. But Jaden, first thing when I'm looking at this box score is the nice little 0 under the personal fouls column. And that somewhat unsurprisingly led to 23 points, 8 of 11 shooting for him, 3 of 4 from deep. So 5 of 7 from 2. He looked comfortable, man, when he's playing off the dribble and able to kind of hit that first off the dribble shot.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like that he's a confidence player. And what a confidence player means is like that confidence can wane sometimes. And it's, and then when it's not there, that's how we get the 1 for 10 games that happen from him sometimes. But tonight, I thought he took advantage of a group of players that he knew he could score against. And that is always good to see from Jaden. It's that reminder, like a couple of those threes late in the second quarter were like off the dribble, step back sort of moves. I tweeted those out if people want to check that out somewhere on my feed there. I thought every time it's just that Chris Finch sort of truism of if Jaden, has a big game offensively, if they find Jaden in the offense, it often leads to a win and leads to good overall offense. I know we were kind of like, it was a little sticky with the ball. They still had a 126.5 offensive rating in this game. I mean, it was extremely efficient offense, even if sticky at times. Maybe some of that had to do with just the opponent there. But Jaden fueled the offense a good amount in a game where I thought, Ant wasn't super efficiently scoring. That Mike was struggling sort of in the first half there. So shout out Jaden McDaniels.
I thought, because he said his name, I thought it was Mike Conley's worst game of the season.
I put that down in my notes too. And then I looked up the plus minus, and he's a plus 20, Ant's a plus 5, Rudy's a plus 12, Towns is a plus 7, and McDaniels is a plus 4. So it's like, I don't know. They win with Conley on the floor.
Isn't that just crazy? I think about this all the time. You did your historic NBA draft with the crunch wears no pants guys. I was just thinking, how cool is it to be covering Mike Conley? Like, it's not in his prime, but he's still just awesome. And I had that in my notes. And then, it's funny that, like, I don't think it's a bad thing to say Mike had maybe his worst game of the season. He had a couple weird turnovers, and then a couple times where it felt like he was kind of going mano-a-mano and forced a couple shots that didn't go in and just frustrated. And it's like, so Mike played bad and was a team best plus 20. Like, that is the Mike Conley experience. But for Jaden, I mean, he cooked Bogdanovich. He had in the first half 2 what I like to call Carmelo threes, where you kind of pull your hands back, like right in front of the team's bench. He was great. And then that was like, because you're watching the game, you're watching all 48, about the clearest sign of when I get frustrated about him not rebounding. He's just constantly guarding the team's best player, and he's constantly on the perimeter, right? Like, so if you look at his stat line, like 0 assists, 2 rebounds, I mean, he was kind of the offensive finisher, right? Like, there wasn't a lot of even opportunities for him to get assists. I also thought, too, just randomly, Detroit was really packing the paint, so there wasn't, like, the lob to Rudy was never there. There just wasn't And that's probably something that's going to come up in April and May, is teams are going to dare Minnesota to still, what did they shoot tonight? 50% from 3, 15 of 30. But I think teams are going to make him do that more often. So he was great. I see some comments that he needs to be more consistent. Absolutely. It goes back to what Finch just said earlier in the season. Grady and Jim talked about it during the call, but he is the barometer for their offense. If he's going, it probably is a good sign that they're going. And pace was a little up and down. Obviously, Detroit didn't bring a lot of defense, but 32 assists is 32 assists. So pretty impressive performance by him. When he makes threes, it just opens up so much for this team, because a lot of times, it's either Carl and Ant, and they don't always have a ton of spacing. So I thought he was phenomenal. I thought he was phenomenal on defense. And yeah, to play 30 minutes and not have any fouls, you kind of got to say that's a step in the right direction.
Cat, 27, 6 and 4. He was 5 for 5 from 3. That makes him 17 of 24 in his last 5 games from deep. And one thing I had been complaining about was the Anderson, McLaughlin, and Gobert minutes. Right when J-Mac kind of got back into the rotation, I was like, this isn't it. It's too little shooting out there. And, the reason for that, or how they kind of just naturally flowed, if you will, into that rotation was, Rudy normally checks out of the game with Mike, like the first or second sub of the game, and then he comes back in late first or to start the second quarter. And so Rudy's out there with whoever the second unit is and was, and that's has, largely worked over the course of the season. But the shift that has happened in the rotation over the last, 2.5 weeks is Jordan McLaughlin is in the rotation, and kind of replaced Troy Brown, who is a shooter. So now whoever the center is that's playing with the second unit is playing with Kyle Anderson and Jordan McLaughlin. It took a couple of games, but they flipped that now. Rudy's playing a little bit longer. Carl's the first big out of the game, in the first half or the second half there. So he comes back in and plays with the second unit. And I just like that second unit a hell of a lot more. Cat, Nas, Anderson, Alexander Walker, and McLaughlin. That just makes a hell of a lot more sense from a shooting and spacing standpoint. It's still going to be tough because that's still 2 players that that the opponent isn't guarding. But I think that's a wise tweak that was due, and I think we can kind of anticipate that to be the thing going forward. I thought it was interesting in the second half, Carl was rolling to start the third quarter. So he takes the long stint in the third quarter, which means Rudy was out with the bench players in the second half. Well, what happened? Jordan McLaughlin didn't play. So I do think, obviously I was not at the game, so not able to, ask Finch the question, but I think it's pretty easy to connect those breadcrumbs that's what's going on there. And I think that's Cap playing with the second unit with McLaughlin. He's shooting the hell out of the ball right now. Again, 17 to 24 from 3 in the last 5 games. So this is what you do when you're a good team, right? You make these little small tweaks over the course of the season that most improve, even if marginally, your biggest areas of weakness. And this is a way to get more offense, or to avoid rather those 6-minute stretches where it's like, I have no idea how this team's going to score the ball. Yeah. Because that's becoming a thing just broadly. Whenever Anthony Edwards is off the floor, this team recently has struggled to score. This second unit, I think, is the best second unit that this team with this roster construction can run right now.
Kind of having some fun with numbers. I know we're only halfway through January, but in December he averaged 20 points a game. He's up to 24 points a game. So December, 20 points a game. January, 24 points a game. 4 threes attempted per game in December. He's up to a little over 5 in January. Again, 5 minus 4 is 1. But I just think that uptick, we've talked about it before, right? Throughout the season, that Karl-Anthony Towns is probably this team's ceiling. Maybe the veterans are their floor. Gobert might be their floor, but Karl opens up that ceiling. 5 for 5 is incredible. It's still not enough. Again, you're trying to nitpick a game that they win and it was never in doubt. But I just think, again, 5 is like
Well,
my
the pick
floor.
and pop was there, right? Like
Yeah.
they would.
Well, they're packing
There
the
was a
paint, yeah.
couple. Yeah, there's just a couple of times where Karl got it on the, and that one, like he caught himself. He had the jab, and then he stepped back. He's like, "No, I need to shoot this," right? And then there was one like a couple possessions later. This is probably like first quarter or second quarter or something, where he did drive, and I was like, and it was one of those where he like probably got fouled on his way to the basket. He fell over, and did pop up and run back. I was just thinking, I was like, man, Karl, it's just would have been saved a lot of effort here. Just shooting it, what is particularly when you're hot, it's like, and you're probably going to hit that top of the key, fairly open, popping 3 50% of the time, for the drive to be just as valuable there, you need to be able to make that at a 75% clip. And that's just a really high bar to drive and navigate through the defense. It's we're not ripping on Cat's 3-point shooting right now because
I want more
elite.
of it.
It's just and I thought what he did was recognize that. He was like, okay, we talked about this after the Clippers game. It wasn't a driving game. It was a shooting game. Karl, that clicked in Karl's head early in the first half of that Clippers game, and it made a difference. Tonight, I thought it was kind of the same thing was required, and could have been more than 5, but 5 for 5. I'm not gonna complain about that.
Yeah, I thought you and Britt had one of the better pods earlier this week on Monday when you just talked about the learning experiences that this team has gone through, especially like an Ant, and how he kind of, after that OKC game, right? He was like, I got a gun, bullets in the chamber, I got to fire them all type thing, and it's like, it might not be the move. And then he's kind of learned through that Celtics loss and some other moments just like to get off of it and find different strategies, because the biggest compliment
before the double comes. That's if you want to go, that's when you got to go.
But just the biggest compliment he can get at 22 is that the coverages are going to continue to get mixed and more difficult. So, but this sticks in my head from a couple weeks ago, maybe in the locker room when Ant was joking post game about how Karl's shots are so easy, and he was complimenting his sidekick. But he's like, everything Karl gets is so easy, and everything he does is so easy. My shots are difficult, and it's just kind of an Antism. But there's just, if you just took 3 ISO possessions a game away from Ant and just made them Karl threes, like that's just gonna help uptick this offense from what are they offensive rating this month or right now? Average 15 to 20. Like that's how you even just get closer to 10. Is just a couple of those wasted possessions, and Ant can basically go at anyone in the league. There's not really anyone that can stop him in the isolation. Just Karl threes again, playoff time, because 29 and 11, you're starting to tinker with things and experiment and figure out what works best for this team come April and May and God forbid June. 8 threes a game, like just let them go. That's the criticism, right? It's like you made 5. If I was 5 for 5 in a game, in any pickup game, there's not a chance I'd pass the ball. Just keep going until I miss. So starting to let it go a little more. I think he's shooting 46% this month, which is a pretty big uptick from December was just kind of a grind for everyone. But Karl taking more threes is the easiest offense this team can get. And that's on a team that has, one of the most prolific pick and roll duos in Mike and Rudy. So more threes, the better.
And they need more in the non-Ant minutes. Tonight they were +5 with him on, +2 with him off. But I was looking it up over the last 3 games prior to tonight. Ant played 111 minutes, and the Wolves won those 111 minutes by 53. In the 40 minutes he sat in those previous 3 games, they lost them by 33. That's too big of a gap, obviously, and that's a testament to Ant, obviously, driving, the winning and scoring and effective offense. It's another thing when we list what are all these small ways that this offense can get a little bit better. Well, they gotta find a way to be an average level offense or close to it in the minutes that Ant is off the floor, because that is a playoff thing, right? Like Ant's gonna sit 8 minutes a game, 6 minutes a game in the playoffs, right? And we've seen from like Jokic and Embiid and some of these other superstar level players how big that can shift things. Even just those 8 minutes, if you're consistently losing those 8 minutes a night in a playoff series by 10 points. And these are just, again, regular season things that you can that you can be thinking about so as to preempt that problem. Yeah, Ant is their best player. He is their best offensive weapon, but he's not going to play sometimes. What can you do? What can be your non-Ant offensive identity? We talked a little bit about the rotation shifting and changing some, but they need a little bit more of that. I don't know if it's a different structure, if they need to play 5 out more in those minutes, but what is it? That's on Chris Finch's to-do list for the second half of the year, finding efficient offense in the non-Anthony Edwards minutes.
And that's why, because I think it was an unpopular opinion, but that's why I loved the Celtics loss. Just the way, I mean, again, it would have been great to have won that game, but just the learning opportunities, because it's probably my most fascinating part with a young adult who's 22 and learning his way is that he now knows and is proven to be one of the best offensive players in the league. But when you become like the elite of the elite, like Luka or all these guys, they know they can do the difficult stuff, but they're like, why wouldn't I just do the easy stuff more? So just finding easier way. I mean, there's not a building or a set of stairs that Ant cannot climb, but it's like, yeah, but Carl's an escalator, right? Or Mike and Conley are an elevator. Like, there's just simpler ways to get baskets. You're going to still need that incredible shot-making ability late in games when it's not just the Timberwolves, right? It's pretty much all 30 teams go heavy ISO late in games. So that's a nice weapon to have, but just a little, again, we're criticizing two guys, Karl and Ant, that played really well and were pretty efficient, but just those little tweaks are things that I'm watching now on the 17th of January, because on the 17th of April, that's actually going to make or break your whole season.
We're gonna take a break here, but we're gonna then get to questions. So, Coop, if you could start grabbing a few of those. Yes.
Let me just say one thing, because you said 3 guys, and we can do it after the break. Right? You said 3 guys. I don't think those would have been my 3 guys I would have talked about tonight. Karl was great. You can't do a podcast and not talk about Nickeil.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I actually think Nickeil was my 3rd guy. Karl, I thought the defense
Nickeil was awesome.
Yes.
Timely. And again, I don't know where the stat line is. I clicked the different tab, but he finished with...
Well, it was just those 2 big buckets, right?
Yep. I was going to say 7
right?
points, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, -6, 2 fouls, no turnovers. So not going to blow you away if you miss this game and just check the box score. He just does so much stuff, man. His energy, he is like a mixture of Jordan McLaughlin and Jaden McDaniels in the sense that he can guard, he can fight around screens, but he also just gives you energy. And then
he's got more offense too, man. That's like, and we're starting to see that. I really think there's a finishing package there at the rim that they, as the 8th man or whatever, they don't need him to get into that much. Maybe when we talk about that second unit offense and the non-Ant minutes, they need a bucket getter. I don't think that's the archetype specifically that Nickeil is. We know what his role is, and we know he's nailing that role. But I do believe there's more playmaking and even some scoring, like at the basket potential in Nickeil's game, that given opportunities, maybe starting some games. You look at the Boston game where he started and how he was able to deliver. Like, talk about Rudy Gobert, serious professional basketball player. So is Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and he's doing that at 24 years old. I tweeted out during the game today, like, this is, if I was just watching this team on League Pass, Nickeil Alexander-Walker would totally be the guy. I'm like, man, you don't know about Nickeil. Like, he's the
all sicko team.
He's because he is. It's if you, as I'm sure everybody who's listening to this now has watched 5-10 plus Wolves games this year, that you just know from it. Like, if you just popped in for a Wolves game, they'd be like, oh, that Nickeil Alexander-Walker guy who's like a draft prospect. Look, he's playing for the Wolves and he's kind of nice, but this is probably a one-off. Like, there is a consistency to Nickeil's game as well that I just really respect it. I really respect, like, he's just a super diligent player, and this team needs that, and particularly from their young core too.
And I can't remember, was it the postseason or the play-in? It was April basketball last season, but he had that corner 3 that he missed, and like the Wolves were blowing a big lead. And it was against Denver, and they're blowing a big lead, and here come the Nuggets. They might sweep the Wolves, and then Nickeil gets another shot in the corner, same shot late in the game, and it's like, you can't shoot this one again, man. You just airballed the hell of that first one. took it with confidence and made it, and it was the biggest shot of that game, I think. Tonight, again, 7 points, 1-3, I think, or 2 threes, but just big, timely shots. And Jim said it in the moment. He's like, Nickeil just finds these timely ways to kind of boost his team. So his shot mechanics are never going to be something you teach at the YBL level, but he just, again, that's a really big thing, right? To have guys on your team that bleed confidence. He might miss a shot and lose him a game, but tonight I thought those 2 shots he hit late were kind of game winners in a sense. Just big to have that confidence. I'm sure that somewhat comes from just being really good, and also probably from the coaching staff, right? Like Finch, I remember hearing at the deadline last year that Finch was played a big role in, like, I want to get Nickeil and stuff. So just having guys like that exude confidence. It's not Malik Beasley level, but can't talk about tonight's win without talking about Nickeil. So, okay, go to break.
100%. We will grab a break here and then get questions ready. We're going to just kind of rip through those for the last half hour or so of this episode. But today's show is brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company, another local sponsor here. We love supporting local companies here and that support us as well. We know not every single one of you have a home improvement need, but some of you do. And if you are looking at getting your windows, you got, leaky windows that are letting in cold air in Minnesota this winter, Your Home Improvement Company has a buy 2, get 2 free deal going on for the month of January with Your Home Improvement Company. It's 0 interest, 0 payment, no money down until 2025. To contact them, it's 952-243-3502. You see that on the screen, or at yhic.com. They also have a bathroom installation deal going on right now, and they're offering 40% off an entire bathroom project for the month of January. So if windows or bathroom is your need, this is a company that is going to give you a fair price and get the job done quickly. Again, 952-243-3502 or yhic.com. Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. And then quickly, Kyle, we wanted to get in some prize picks.
We'll do this quick
for you for the Sunday, or I guess Saturday and Sunday slate of the NFL. What do you got for me?
Pretty easy. We'll keep it short. This is the best weekend of football, by the way. If you're a casual fan, even it's not last weekend when there's more games. It's this weekend where it's kind of the best of the best. So real quick, real easy. David Montgomery over 58.5 rushing yards. Detroit at home in a game that they're favored by 6. I imagine they probably beat the Bucs pretty handily, despite the fact that I hate the Lions. Pacheco over 63.5 rushing yards against the Bills. I think that game is probably more of a James Cook Pacheco game, despite the 2 stars at quarterback. Let's get weird. The only way the Texans and the Stroud boys can beat the Ravens is if Nico Collins goes off. So over 99.5 receiving yards. That's a little demon.
Juiced, right? I saw
a
that.
little extra sauce there. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown at home over 0.5 receiving and rushing touchdowns. He's going to score. I bet all of my journalistic credibility on it. So that pays out something like 11-1.
I got it here. It's
16-1 if you really want to risk it. So
if you do the power play,
it's a good weekend for PrizePicks if you want to give it a shot. Like you said, gamble responsibly. It's a fun, different way to have a little juice in the game. And the promo code's awesome because, like you said, you get a $100 match.
Yes, $100 sign-up bonus at PrizePicks.com or on the PrizePicks app. I think it's the NFL is still going on. Your fantasy season's over. This is a fun way to remain in the NFL loop, which I am feeling very removed from right now as my fantasy season is obviously, as all of them are over. I'm such a bad NFL fan, man. Like I don't know. It's once fantasy ends, I'm just like, and there was all the games kind of stunk last weekend, and I was at Target Center for when the one good game was Rams Lions, which was happening when the Wolves were playing the Clippers. I'll lock back in.
I used the Wi-Fi from McDonald's to stream the second half of a football game because I had no power, and that's when I was like, wait, I was like 3 McChickens deep, and I was just like, this might be the low point. So I'm so sorry to hear you were spending your weekend at Target Center with power and lights and heat. But yeah, hooray, PrizePicks. I have a I know we're gonna do questions, but this is like the best way to kind of close this out for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So I do those dumb tweets, and I said that the Wolves, 29-11, 15-16 Timberwolves. Now let's put the expert on the spot a little bit. The 15-16 Timberwolves were 29-53. Do you remember anything from that season? And can you name how many guys from that team can you list? I will give you one clue. That was the Karl-Anthony Towns rookie season.
Justin Hamilton.
No.
Lorenzo Brown. No, that's the Wiggins rookie year.
Yeah, that's the Wiggins rookie. This team actually has like this, because I'm thinking now 29-11, right? This is the best start they've ever had. 29-53 is embarrassing. But if I start going through that list, that wasn't. And there's another way I want to bring this up. So do you want any more guesses before we get into it?
Yeah, you already burned my two guesses of Justin Hamilton and Lorenzo Brown.
So let me go through the lineup quick, because one of these players was in attendance tonight.
Oh, Andre Miller, yeah. Tayshaun, Andre, KG. Who else started? Levine, Wiggs, and
Towns, Greg Smith, Fresno State's own. He was a random wolf of the week over at Flagrant Howls, a great podcast. You should subscribe. I'm going to butcher this. Damian Rudez,
baby.
Thank you. Ricky Rubio, Tayshaun Prince, Peck, Adrian Payne, Shabazz Muhammad, Andre Miller, Kevin Martin, Zach
This
Levine.
is the Sam Mitchell team.
Yep, Tyus Jones, Kevin Garnett, Gorgie Jang, and then Belly. So that team was about as promising as it gets. It also seems like that team was 40 years ago. But, I mean, you had Wiggs and Towns and Tyus and all these rookies, and it was just like that's about as promising as it got. And then what happened? I don't know. Tom Thibodeau showed up, but
anyone who watched 20 or more of those
should get a tax
29
credit.
Wins. Well, they get this season.
That's true.
Those are the people I think about when the Wolves are just racking up the wins. This season is the very many people, myself included, who sat around and watched those games when they were 17 and 40 or whatever.
They're over under that.
I got to get home for the Wolves game.
Their over under on wins was 27.5, and they actually went over. So that was probably the first time in 64 years the Wolves have gone over a win total. So no,
Brandon says here on the screen that was his first season as a Wolves fan. I'm sorry.
Oh my, that's
crazy
like
you're still here.
No, what do you mean? Like that he doesn't have much scar tissue. He doesn't have the achy knees we talk about with the Timberwolves rain and arthritis. So yeah, fun to monitor that. We're running out of these. If you hate those tweets, I'm running out of them because there's only so many. We're gonna get into like good territory where they won 58 games, but yeah, fun stuff. So Coop, give us a question.
Yeah, let's do it. Alec Downing, what is making Finch not play Troy Brown Jr. consistently? The offensive numbers are very good, but this team clearly needs offense. Do you have any hunches? The answer to that is defense. I think it's and I actually don't think of Troy Brown as like a bad defender, but I remember in the first game where like Troy Brown was on his way out of the rotation. I don't remember what the specific game was, but he like played in the first half and didn't play in the second half. And Finch was asked about it, and he just said, "I needed defense in this game." And kind of since then, Troy Brown has been out of the mix. And I don't know. I mean, numbers. I guess that the offensive numbers are good there. We're talking about pretty small samples. We're talking about him playing, I don't know, a lot of his minutes in that Oklahoma City Thunder game. Not to take away from those minutes, but he played very well in that Oklahoma City Thunder game. The Wolves did too. They probably don't believe that those numbers will sustain because it is such a small sample size. But I don't think like him or Shake are like shelved by any means from this team. Obviously, they're players who potentially could get moved at the deadline, but I'm really impressed by Troy in particular. Like he's an extremely like positive person on the bench. I mean, and most people are just seeing that on TV, but like he looks like one of those players who knows he signed a contract to be a fringe rotation player. Mm-hmm. And when he is being treated as a fringe rotation player, he's not bummed out about it, and that's important. I'd extend that to Shake Milton as well. They have a team with 8 players who clearly belong in the rotation and 3 who maybe do, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, they're leaning into Jordan McLaughlin, if for no other reason than that one, the numbers there I think are pretty good too, and turnovers is the biggest problem this team has. So having, Jordan play the majority of the minutes that Mike Conley's off the floor, I think in theory establishes some of that ball movement and subtracts from some of the, turnovers. That those are the signs I've gotten, at least, for why Troy for now is out of the rotation.
Yeah, they played 8 guys tonight, or Finch played 8 guys tonight. All 8, or he played more than that, but 8 guys got 20 minutes or more tonight. Kyle Anderson, Nas, and obviously Nikhil all played north of actually 22 minutes. So I don't know. I mean,
we're at like 8.5 now, right? I mean, a ninth didn't even play against the Clippers. It's not becoming uncommon that if it's J-Mac or whoever, they play 7-8 minutes in the first half and then don't play in the second half, which is basically what happened tonight.
And it's just there's a little Tibbs in Finch. I mean, and I don't know if it's just specifically Tibbs and Finch or just a lot of coaches don't want to let go of that rope, right? I mean, we're talking about the same team that blew more double-digit leads last year than any other team in the league. So there might be some achy knees for Chris Finch of just like, I'm not doing that again. So I'm just going to grind some of these guys out. I mean, no one really played it. Mike only played 29 minutes today. No one played an unhealthy amount. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know. It's just part of being what I still think is one of the deeper teams in the league. It's just who are you going to play him over? I mean, Kyle Anderson, even despite some of his offensive warts, like that's a starter on a lot of teams, as is Nas and as is Nikhil.
That's what I think about often with the whole idea of the trade deadline is like, okay, we know the 9th spot is kind of a hole. Mm-hmm. On this roster right now, but we also know it's not a very big role, right? So it's like, how much do you want to invest in a trade if that's what the role is, Now maybe do you make some sort of move that puts that player into the Anderson, Reed, Alexander Walker group, mm-hmm. and is as good or better than them? Sure, like that would be great, but then now you've watered down the minute total for all 4 of those guys, and there's still plenty of games against the Clippers. I think Nas played like 14 minutes. They're leaning heavy into their starters, particularly when Kat and Jaden and Rudy aren't in foul trouble, or Ant too. There's just not a ton left on the bench, which I'm not saying I'm a proponent necessarily of trading Kyle Anderson. Obviously, it depends on the deal and who the player is and stuff like that. But that idea makes more sense to me in that Kyle Anderson would then be out of the rotation, mm-hmm. Or it wouldn't be on the team then. Yeah. And so whoever the player is that you're trading for comes in and it has a greater bandwidth available.
That's a good segue into Sarah Washington's question, which is pretty simple. And I thought this during the game. And the question is, why did Finch roll with Kyle Anderson for so long as he did? The spacing was horrible. I thought that too. And I thought, they're packing the paint. Like, this is just one of those times where you could have more spacing. And then I checked the box score, and in 22 minutes, he had 9 assists and led the team. And it is kind of the Kyle Anderson. Barf always says this is the Minnesota Timberwolves experience. This is the Kyle Anderson experience. It's like, he was no threat to score. He only had 2 or 4 points. But he just finds ways to get the ball moving and make it click in his kind of, as you've been calling him now more and more, he's a center. Right, he is kind of a Draymond Green type, really good defensive guy, finds guys on offense and doesn't really ever look to score. That could be problematic in the postseason, but tonight I also thought those 9 assists really kind of helped maintain their run and help kind of fend off the Pistons. So it is a double-edged sword, and I'm not anti-Kyle. I just keep saying, like, the trade reason you would even throw him in is because he has the best, juiciest expiring contract. So... like you said, Finch loves him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my not to take away from the question, I guess, but like I wasn't surprised that Finch rolled with Kyle Anderson as long as he did, because Finch always rolls with Kyle Anderson as long as he did tonight. Like, that's the role right now that Finch has given Kyle, is a role that even if in your first stint or your second stint the spacing is problematic and issues happen, Finch has a belief that third stint or that fourth stint is going to be better. There's that. We've seen it 0 times in 40 games this year that Finch has been like, no Kyle Anderson here because spacing is an issue. We can make an argument that he should be doing it. I'm just kind of past the point of being surprised that he did. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, not to be super glass half empty here, but there's a chance that when we do our last pod of the season at some point in June, that Kyle Anderson will be the reason that, the spacing just finally caught up to him. But tonight, again, he leads the team in assists, blocks, and steals. And it wasn't sexy, and it was really clunky on offense. And I just thought the offense in general stood out more than ever tonight. Lack of, attention to detail, all that stuff, lack of ball movement. But he just is the Swiss Army knife that doesn't have any sort of sharp object to hurt you offensively, but defensively he's got all the tools. He's got the nail thing, all the little twisty ties, open a wine bottle. He's just Finch's, and he really is. And Finch is so awesome. The more you watch him, I know I'm pro Finch, but he's like me watching the game when he's like, enough is enough. I'm so tired. Like, just put Kyle back in there. I mean, I joked with you 2 weeks ago. Sometimes he just subs Kyle in Kyle doesn't know who to go in for. He's just, I don't know, Kyle, just figure it out and fix it.
Yeah,
and
that's Kyle and Conley. Yeah.
Yeah. That's his role on this team is, Mike Conley's the DD and Kyle's going to direct him home. So good question though. I mean, it's something that a lot of people, it really stands out when you're watching the game, when the spacing, when he's not even looking for his own offense. So
let's grab another question here. I'll take this one. This one's from Kevin LaRose. Is this team a guard bucket getter away from an NBA Finals run? Could you see a trade for a guard or someone in the buyout market? Nas and Kyle off the bench. Feel like we need to acquire that piece. To the what we were talking about before with the non-Ant minutes, that's what the non-Ant minutes are kind of needing is somebody who, again, if it does get bogged down to late in the clock, can do a poor man's version of what Ant does. They don't have that in the second unit right now. It's kind of Kyle, right?
Yeah.
Kyle Anderson is sort of, and that is a much more methodical attack of the basket there, and obviously less effective. You could certainly use a bucket getter on this team. That's a archetype of player that I think a lot of us don't typically love, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're like, oh, it's a all offense, no defense, Jamal Crawford type of player. What I've just been saying about the bucket getter idea is if there was ever a team that could use an all offense and no defense guy, in theory, right, it's the team that's number 1 on defense and number 15 on offense.
Yep.
I don't know. The question I have with that is how much does having one bucket getter off your bench hurt the overall stability of your defense? What I think kind of makes the Wolves defense great when it is great is all 4 perimeter players around Rudy are staying connected, and that's some bucket getters can't do that. Right. But if you have that it needs to be a bucket getter, I think, that you feel confident that you say, hey, if you're going to play and if you're going to play 18 minutes a night for the Wolves, that's the requirement on defense. We're not playing we're not playing 4-on-5 on defense. If you're out there, you need to at least stay attached. And I don't know. I mean, if we went through the Bones Highlands and the, Alec Burks and those type of players, the hard part is, for these players, I think that we're not watching all the time, but we're watching occasionally. You can get a feel for what their offensive game is, but when you're sporadically watching a player, I don't know how good of a defender is Alec Burks. At that point, I'm looking at past defensive metrics and that sort of thing. And that's the question is, can you rely on a bucket getter to be neutral-ish on defense? If you can, this team should get that player.
I have some thoughts. No, I have some thoughts on this. So you look at the guys that played tonight, right? I said 8 guys played north of 20 minutes. That's kind of your playoff rotation, right? If you don't make a trade, those are your 8 guys.
Yeah.
And I can't think of 5 people in Minnesota, the state in general, that have a higher Q score right now than a Nikhil and a Nas. So let's just say those 2 are your 6th and 7th men. I've been struggling with this, and as much as I love trades, I love just being in the Siakam trade moment today, right? The notifications, the analysis.
Yeah.
How? I guess I'm just trying to ease everyone or kind of cool the jets. This team probably doesn't make a sizable move. Where do you even fit that in? Like, what do you do to disrupt? You go get a real, like you said, bucket getter, volume guy that becomes your sixth guy, but now creates essentially like a hole in this really tight defense you have, and now you're playing four
And that's the
defenders
thing,
survive.
it's
like
Anderson, right? You go into Anderson
Yeah.
and Anderson, and I know that's the frustration, like the question had about the offense and the spacing, but he often does enough, like you said tonight, with the 9 assists to sort of make the offense work. And then he's one of the best perimeter defenders on this team. We get like Jaden and Nikhil, and when they slither over the top of a screen and come for a rear view contest block, you're like, whoa, that's a great perimeter defender. But if you look at the numbers and you look at the fact, or the infrequency with which Kyle Anderson gets blown by, like that dude stays as well connected. Like we're saying, he stays as connected to his man as anyone does on this team. So if you trade Kyle Anderson, like, yeah, your spacing issues are probably solved. You do create a hole in your ability to guard bigger wings, because Kyle Anderson is one of, honestly, if not the best at guarding big wings on this team. It's oddly kind of like him and Ant.
And two, to this bucket getter thing, because now I'm starting to get 29-11 has officially put me over to like I'm starting to think playoff rotations a little more. I don't know if it's the ice storm melting, but I'm starting to think like it's spring. And you know what? You know where the bucket getters might be? Just 42 minutes of Ant and 42 minutes of Karl. You know what I mean? Like it might just be we're not going to rely on Bones Island or any of these guys on the bench. It's just going to be we're just going to lean into Ant more. We're just going to lean into Karl more. So I think this is not a slop podcast. I would imagine the slop will pick up as we approach the trade deadline in early February. But I think they make a move. That's not what this pod's about. But I think they make a move, and I think that move is somewhat significant, and I think it's after February 8th. I think they become, for the first time in 35 years, a destination for a potential buyout guy. Because, again, they're limited in assets. What are you going to give up? If you're not going to trade Kyle, I don't know how many teams are knocking down the door to get like Wendell Moore, Shake Milton in a second. There's just other teams out there that have more ammo. So just curious. Give me 30 seconds. We teased this a little bit on Flagrant Howls. Chris Paul buyout market. Would you do it?
What?
I'm just curious.
As a buyout, you just sign him at the minimum,
right? I mean, because there will be guys that as things fall apart in teams, and like maybe Chris Paul's in a trade to a team that loses salary, and then they buy him out or whatever. I'm just thinking, he fits one of those three things we've talked about as a backup point guard. He's not a movement shooter. He's not a volume scorer. But how likely is that? I don't know. We're getting a little speculative. But the reason I thought that is because
I guess I just hadn't even thought of him as a buyout guy, but yeah,
the Detroit Pistons play basketball at what I think is a hockey arena, and it was wet on that floor tonight because multiple guys slipped. And when Mike Conley slipped in the first half, I had a stroke, and all I could think of is they need more than ever. And you and I go back and forth all the time. What do they need? What do they need? They need Mike Conley insurance. You joked the other day that if they lose Mike, they're screwed anyway. Probably true, but Chris Paul in a potential buyout market at least gives them another point, kind of old school point guard that JJ Redick said has gone away. It's just something to think about. I don't know. It was fun. I hate him, but I'm sure once you become a Minnesota Timberwolf, I will defend you to the death.
All right, let's grab another question.
Let's do one more
here. Slow Joe. Why is Finch considered a great offensive coach when he just lets his players do whatever they want? I think it's this whole question of, flow versus structure. And obviously there's times that this team could have used more structure over the past year and a half.
Right.
And Finch has said as much. If you want the actual answer to this, I'm not saying this is my opinion or anything. It's that Finch has a belief, and I don't disagree with this part of it, that the best basketball comes out of unscripted action and movement off of that. And that is true. The question and the problem for the Wolves is the frequency with which that hits. Finch's flow-based offensive system, if they found that flow more frequently, would lead to great offense. We've seen that in previous seasons. We've seen these teams find that comfort and that understanding and that sort of like subconscious, connection with their teammates that has fueled them to be an elite team for this offensively for the second half of the past 2 seasons. And this team right now hasn't done that. They haven't turned a big offensive corner, and the frequency with which the flow hits has not been high enough. I think you have like 3 major things that get in the way of that frequency. One, I think it's a ball dominant scorer in Anthony Edwards, which isn't a bad thing. It just, that type of player at that type of usage gets in the way of flow. You have a superstar offensive big man who has been relegated to a different role that he's accepted, but he doesn't totally want to relent, his spot in the pecking order, his usage there too. So there's still some of this from Ant and Cat, I think, a little bit of individual want that gets in the way of flow and that type of offense. And then obviously the spacing issues. Just is a team that has a lot of non-shooters and doesn't shoot threes at a high volume clip. All 3 of those things get in the way of Finch's ideal vision for how offense is played. The reason people think Finch is a great coach is they think that's a great vision with the right roster, and he knows how to tap into that. He hasn't tapped into that yet, and thus far this season has not been a great offensive coach because they're a middling offensive team that has the problems that they've had offensively have sustained pretty much for the entirety of the first 40 games of the season. Like, there hasn't really been a great month of offense from this team. There's been many great overall months for the team because the defense has been so good, but we haven't seen it. And yeah, you could make an argument that this team could use more structure. I make that all the time. But you can't just delete Finch, get a new coach that has more structure, and be as good as you are, because Finch himself is such a important factor of why this group is meshing as well as it has as overall, and that's really showing up on the defensive side of the floor. Also, Chris Finch, if you asked him that, would say, "I'm not an offensive coach." Like he's been asked that. He's like, "No, I've always seen myself as defense first." And he goes, "I think," I'm not kind of butchering their quote, but he's like, "I think that's based off of some of the styles in which I ran offense overseas, but that was out of necessity." He's not a self-proclaimed elite offensive coach by any means, and has some work to do offensively with this group as well. But that's the flow versus structure thing.
I think most of that's on me, because I think for like 18 months since he got here and replaced Ryan, I was like, he's a wizard. But that's when the expectations were low, the defense was even lower, and he was just kind of doing what any CEO does at a new company or a coach. He's just like, let me try a bunch of stuff. Like, I am so pro Finch, maybe more than anyone, but I'll never forget that he just like didn't know who Jaden McDaniels was for the first couple of weeks and like didn't play him or didn't start him. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a valid question too, because the offense is not great, and this numbers now as you get into 40 games, 50 games, it's like that is kind of the bugaboo. That's like the thing teams are starting to nitpick, or analysts or whatever. But it is the first defense in the league. They've been top in defense for as long as I can remember. And also, too, he's made the Karl and Rudy thing work. I mean, there's a lot of numbers when they're on the floor together. Like, hey, this is gone are the days, right, where it's like, I mean, there was a period in time where we did these pods. Like, well, as long as they can just stagger them and play one center at a time, it's like he has figured out that. There is still ways to go. I would imagine he hates when Ant just goes heavy ISO. And that's not picking on Ant. Again, he's awesome.
I think we know he does hate that.
So, and, I think he hates all the extra.
Not hate it. Hate isn't the right thing, but,
it would be ideal
you
if he
listen to
moved
the press
ball.
conferences after those games where the offense bogs down in the fourth quarter, and Finch is openly and consistently hard on Ant's play.
And we're doing this live on YouTube. So if you're there, shout out to everyone in the chat. Shout out to everyone that's watched this tonight. We're going to try to do a couple more of these, I think, this season. Yeah. But if you are on YouTube, it means a lot, subscribe, trying to get those numbers up. But I saw comments earlier that said post-game, because we skipped this, Finch was angry dad again. and just said we didn't take them seriously. The offense was stagnant, and I love that. That's part of the reason I'm pro him is that, he could have tweeted out too 29-11, haven't done this since Karl's rookie year, and he's like, we were bad, and they need some of that.
How do people react to that? To my tweets? Said angry dad. No, like angry dad. Like that's a thing. Like and
yeah.
Like is that a joke, or is that like this is annoying that the coach is this way? Because it sounds like
I want to. I'm just going to speak for myself. I like that. I like that this team and the marketing department and the ownership, everyone is blowing smoke up this team's ass because they are having the best season they've ever had, and that he seems like, and again, you're there for half these games, he seems like he is just not going to let them. He's going to try his hardest to not let them get big heads or like to think the same thing that I'm thinking, like, oh my God, we're 29-11.
Or just to not get unserious like
they
did in the first half tonight. Which
is so like again,
a pretty objective analysis of what happened, right?
And not to get into the weeds, but I think you would agree. Like, this is still like a players' league, and this is still like a league that, you can be the best coach in the league and tell. I mean, I still love Popovich, right? And you watch his team, and he's just got some young guys that do a bunch of dumb stuff. And this team has older players that usually are the floor again, but Ant and Jaden and Karl, even though Karl's a little older, like they're. I made that Citadel joke the other week about Ant. This team, the core of this team doesn't have a lot of big game reps, so they just revert to, in animosity or in tough times, to kind of do what they used to do in college or AU, and that's just kind of win it by themselves. So that's what you're going to look for. I mean, we are at the halfway point, right? After tomorrow's game against the Grizzlies, it'll be 41 games in. This next 41 games is can we train some of these guys now? Like, the defense, they bring it every night. Obviously, tonight they give up 40 points in the first quarter, but then they kind of locked in. Second quarter only gave up 22. So the defense probably is just going to translate the rest of the season. But can Finch connect through these guys more to do some of the stuff we said? 3 less ISOs and 3 more cat threes, a little more ball movement, swing it around. So I think it's a good question. It's something that maybe we, as in the mainstream media, said that Finch was this offensive wizard, when it's like, actually, I just did that stuff because I had weird rosters, but I really want to do is just lock teams down and protect the rim.
Yeah. No, I think that's true too. Let's grab maybe 1 or 2 more quick questions.
Yeah. Rapid fire. Yes. Finch said after the game, I didn't like our seriousness tonight. I didn't either, but the Pistons covered. So
who sits tomorrow night for rest against the Grizzlies? I mean, I don't think, yes, Conley missed that game, but I don't think we're at the point of assuming that players are going to be resting. Maybe, but why? There's been other times to rest this season, and the only time anyone's ever rested is after the disastrous Orlando-Boston travel thing. So I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard anything. The only thing I've heard is it's super important to Mike Conley individually to play in as many games as he can. He's not doing the thing of like, where can I be strategic about the nights off? Like he's not there.
And so you said that to me, or on the pod, you're like, it's really important to Mike Conley, but we've talked a little offline. There's a chance too, and this is the stuff you can't measure, right? Culture, all that stuff, that it's important to all these guys that they do want to play. And I don't know, I still have my gripes with the league in general. I don't know if that's always the case for 29 other teams, that their guys, they're 29-11. It's like, let me just take the night off. I don't want to play tonight. I think these guys do want to play. Like, I saw tonight on the injury report, the only guy that was on there that's a rotation player was Ant, questionable. It had the word knee, so people thought it was all the knee tendinopathy stuff. Again, it's like, from my understanding, completely unrelated. He's wearing that great. But I mean, I think these guys just want to play. And I don't know, I get wanting to preserve them, but if they want to play, and we're talking about that this is not a finished product and they're not perfect and they have things to work on, what are they going to get? I know I'm kind of talking on both sides of the ball. What are they going to gain by resting Ant tomorrow, who's one of the key cogs and sometimes the ball being sticky?
Yeah, it's like, how relevant does the game, like how much productive stuff can happen if Ant doesn't play, because Ant is the foundation of how you play, right? Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Like, I don't know. Maybe it does start coming. I think part of the reason why this has been such a lightning rod thing in the weird Wolves niche is that, we're looking around at the rest of the league and we're seeing guys, particularly of Mike Conley's age, or of Anthony Edwards' stature or Cat's stature in the league resting games. But a lot of times those players that are resting are doing so around a back-to-back. Tomorrow, right, is just the fourth back-to-back that they have of like 13.
And they have a lot,
weirdly haven't had that many back-to-backs. So I don't anticipate them to be a heavy back-to-back rest team. But if they're going to be a kind of back-to-back rest team, it makes sense to me that they didn't do it in the first two back-to-backs. They rested Rudy and Conley in the third one. I don't know. Maybe they do tomorrow, but this is also, it's a back-to-back, but you had Monday and Tuesday off. You're back home on Thursday. You have Friday off, and the game that, like, we're not at a super tenuous place in the schedule that I think makes you be like, you got to do this. I think people just look at, you could beat the Grizzlies without whoever. Sure. I guess you could, but playing them against the Grizzlies isn't necessarily a bad thing either, and is probably a productive thing in that you're establishing more and more of these. I mean, that's what he's doing. He's using all 82 games to establish as many habits and to improve this team in the areas where they're not that good yet. Like, I don't think Finch believes that they can improve for the big picture if they're resting Conley or Gobert or Cat or Ant with any consistency, because the team is that group of players. And if you remove one, like the Kings game, right? When Cat didn't play and they beat them, it's like, great. But like, if you play the Kings in the playoffs or whatever the next time is you play him, Cat's going to play.
Yeah.
And now the time Karl did play against the Kings, you got torched because they were moving the ball and they're making the Karl run around, So there is value in playing. I'm not saying there isn't value in resting, but I guess I'm gathering a greater appreciation for the commitment to playing players night to night, because I think I see that's what the vision is. And I think I see a team that, to go to the Western Conference Finals or whatever, needs to figure out a whole bunch of stuff during the regular season. Not because they're bad. They're great. They're 2 games up in the Western Conference at 29-11. But any of us that are watching this closely know, like, there are some things that this team still needs to figure out. I think Finch just believes they figure them out better by playing.
And it's 40. It's crazy, right? Because we're doing so many pods and it's just content every day. But they're not technically even halfway through the season. And they know that according to, I think it's like Tankathon, they have like the third easiest remaining schedule for the rest of the season. That is always in flux, and you never know who's going to play. But they do have a lot of back-to-backs coming up. And maybe towards the 55-game mark, 65-game mark, they start to rest guys a little bit. But, this is not in the equation, but I know it's in the equation for other teams and players. Like, you start skipping a game here and there, and then you sprain an ankle and you're out 2 weeks. You get really close to getting yourself eliminated from postseason awards. And I don't think that's why these guys are suiting up every night. But I really do think, and it's weird again, it's like the buyout market. We're not used to this organization, this roster, this franchise having a really good culture. And when guys show up to the arena every night and Finch is like, can you go? Can you tie them up? Then you're going to play. I think that's big. So it's something to monitor. There's still more than half the season left. But
we'll see.
We'll see what happens. By the way, just to close it up, I know they play the Grizzlies tomorrow. Patreon, get some tickets. If you thought the Blazers threw out some guys you didn't know, buddy, good luck. Because I don't know who the Grizzlies have other than Jaren Jackson Jr.
Derrick Rose, baby.
They have a point guard who I thought was created.
Gilliard?
That's
Jay Gilliard, Justin.
Sure.
Yeah, he's short. Yeah, we'll see. No, I mean, and to that point, like, I find myself always making their argument for not resting players, just because maybe I have some insight to that, or I'm at all the press conferences and maybe some people aren't listening to all of those. There's totally merit in resting guys. Like I'm not taking away from that. I'm just trying to impart what I understand their opinion to be. Let's do one more question, then we'll wrap it up.
I don't think Hoop has any more. So can I?
Can I
ask you? I'll ask you a question. This is from @Kyle Theige on Twitter. So the Wolves have a short turnaround tomorrow. They play the Grizzlies. We've kind of gone over this. The Grizzlies are bad. The Wolves are good. Saturday, Wolves Thunder. How excited are you? Because you are a closet Thunder fan. We've talked about this before. I'm watching more Thunder because I'm starting to become a believer too. I think they are a piece away.
I didn't watch the game last night. So
the Clippers, man, the Clippers, and it's just fun. It's fun, right? Like these teams now that are the top of the West aren't your typical teams that are at the top of the West, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Nuggets are always going to hang around, but the Clippers, the Wolves looked crisp, and the Clippers came to play, and the Wolves said, no, little brother them. Clippers come back next game or the second next game and just did that same thing to the Thunder. So there's still really, really good matchups. They play the Thunder twice this month, I think, at home and at OKC at the end of the month. But the Grizzlies game will be another Pistons game.
It's like two in the next 2 weeks,
right? Yep. The Grizzlies game at home, a late tip for those of you in the Midwest. I think it's a 9 o'clock tip on TNT. No Jim, no Grady. But that'll be another Pistons game where your knees will ache. It might get down to single digits in the fourth.
And it's a national TV game. So I think there's a whole different to the resting thing,
so I'm sure Stan Van Gundy will do 12 minutes on Cole Aldrich because that's how much prep he does for these games. He was terrible in the Sixers game. He spent the whole game talking about Ben Simmons and like Bruce Brown, or the coach Brown. But anyway, that Thunder game is going to be another litmus test of like, okay, you're in this easy path now and there's no ice on the ground. But then the Thunder come to town, and it's interesting to see how they match up against that team because they're fearless. They don't get rattled. That's like the biggest thing I take away from watching them.
You know what was encouraging about the Clippers game was like they come off of basically a preseason game on Friday against the Blazers. And I think we were all kind of thinking it literally when that Blazers game was going on because we're like, I don't want to think about this basketball game I'm watching right now. But you're like, how do you
get up for it?
Yeah, and they did, right? So to that end, even if the Grizzlies game, I mean, again, this is just part of being a good team. It's like you just need to take care of business against the terrible team that we don't know any of the players' names on it, and you just need to take care of business there, rest on Friday, and then Saturday matters. Like what is a 2-game lead now? I think because the Wolves
2 clear in the West. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, all things stay the same, and you beat OKC. Now you put a 3-game gap between yourselves and the Thunder. Given the rate at which the Wolves are winning, you start becoming the clear betting favorite, I would think, for the 1 seed. Maybe Denver in the mix there too, of course.
And then maybe that's when you rest guys, right? This is a marathon. It is an 82-game marathon, and if they can continue to run at a fast pace, you'll never remember how much they beat the Pistons by. You'll just know they beat them. So if they can continue to win game after game and give themselves some distance in the West, because again, it's all about getting home court in that first round, maybe second round, third round. Then you can kind of ease off a little bit, and I'm sure Finch will, but these games matter still, and that's probably the best explanation I can give as to why Mike Conley is going to play 28 minutes tomorrow is because they matter. They matter to him. They matter to the standings, and Wolves-Grizzlies on TNT.
Well, that's all I got. I had Alec Burks as a trade candidate in my notes,
and then I watched him play, and I was like, "No, I'm good."
I was watching their previous game. He's an interesting one in the sort of shooter bucket getter combination. He's not necessarily like a movement shooter type of player. He's more of like a contested catch and shoot guy, and I don't know. I think I want more of the Malik Beasley archetype. If you're going to get, I'm not to take away from Burks. I actually think Burks is a pretty good player, and he was good. Like even before he went to Detroit, he's pretty good at the Knicks. But I was watching the Pistons previous game, and I was thinking about that. And most I was like, okay, that's not a movement shooter. And I think what this team needs is a movement shooter, somebody who can attack space on the perimeter, seek it out for a catch and shoot opportunity, but also. If they get a shooter guy, I want it to be somebody who just flies off of Rudy Gobert, like off ball screens, just like off ball pin downs, flare actions, all that sort of stuff. Rudy can do that for somebody. There's just nobody on the team really, other than maybe Karl, who could do that. You're not running a lot of 4 or 5 pin down actions, but. I just started thinking about that, and I think we're both more on movement shooter than we are on bucket getter.
Yeah,
for it, but that's kind of what it is. It's just like, man, if you just had one of those weapons that hits 1 or 2 of those, and then the defense freaks out to throw 2 at him, and now Rudy's slipping, and the lane's wide open for Ant, etc. Like I think as of today that's where I'm at, and I guess I just don't know enough about Alec Burks to know if he's exactly that. I kind of like there's like open knockdown shooter, catch and shoot guys. There's catch and shoot guys who can make it with a hand in their face, and then the third level is they can do all those things, plus they can fly off of pin downs like a JJ Redick, Malik Beasley, that type of player. That's the third level. That's a pretty high bar. I know Malik Beasley.
You want a guy that flies. You want I would say the Malik Beasley reunion tour. You got a guy that can fly around screens and shoot threes and has good chemistry with Rudy. Bring back Matt Ryan. There's your deadline move, baby. Chris Paul, we've seen enough of you. Matt Ryan, come back. 7 for 10 threes against the Nuggets in the finals. Who you got this week? Is this it? What's the schedule?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, just next episode will be Jason and I after that late Grizzlies game on Thursday night. Jason and I will record Friday morning. Maybe we'll do it a little bit later because we're gonna be up pretty late. But that'll be out sometime Friday afternoon. Wolves Thunder on Saturday. As of now, I think our plan is to record about that one on Monday morning. So we'll go from there. But next up is Jace on Friday afternoon. You're Kyle Theige. I'm Dane
Shout
Moore.
out Cooper Carlson.
And Cooper Carlson in the background throwing the questions up there. I appreciate y'all coming on here and listening to us jibber jabber about a Pistons game. This is fun to do. Kyle, thanks for doing it.
Peace.
Yeah.